Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Apartment Department, the podcast for multifamily marketers by multifamily marketers. I'm Ann Baum, your co-host, VP of Marketing at Town Properties. With me, as always, is my co-host, Chris Johnson, marketing leader at Irwin R. Rose down in Dallas, Texas. We have a fun episode today because we have a fellow marketing leader with us, Paul Burke from Oakwood Management. They have 11,400 units, and they are primarily based in the Columbus, Ohio MSA, which is one of the largest growing markets right now. Like, people are all excited to talk about Ohio all of a sudden, which is great for us. But we're excited to have Paul on for a couple reasons. One, I have a funny story about how Paul and I met that I want to share with everyone. So Paul, maybe 6 or 8 months ago, was running a LinkedIn campaign. He basically put together this wonderful marketing white paper as a lead gen tool for third-party management. And I filled out the form and he got in touch with me like, hey, you're probably not looking for our services. I was like, no, but this is the best thing I've ever seen. And so we then became friends and we ran into each other at an event at Columbus, and now we're here. So Paul is really excited because he's really diving into the world of SEO, which is huge because SEO is one of those things that the foundation and the idea of it always stays the same. However, some of the tactics and other things, have grown over the years. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Paul.
Well, first, thanks for having me. It's been great listening to you guys, especially because I'm somewhat newer to this industry. And so to actually have a resource to listen to and be like, oh, what do other marketing leaders think, has been actually really helpful. So I've learned something from every episode I've listened to. But yeah, so I think SEO in particular is it's something I've worked on previous to this job. And I wasn't really sure how it worked as far as being a more like local sort of service. And with SEO changing, sort of, I guess, famously in the marketing world, like HubSpot's traffic has gone down like 80% or something like that in the last 6 months because of SEO. But I think one of the interesting thing that we're seeing a ton of growth in that channel because we're investing in the right things and not just sort of content. I think when a lot of people think of SEO, they think of, oh, we need more landing pages and blog posts. And I think all that stuff is certainly true. And backlinks and domain authority and all that. But I think also when you think of the actual content, in terms of images and videos, are part of sort of generating a lot of trust and topical authority to, broad searches. Because I think we know, no one's going to, compete with Zillow or apartments.com for the top 1, 2, 3 spots on Google, right? So you kind of have to get creative and find the marginal wins where you can, because that organic traffic is so valuable. So that's one thing I'm super excited about. It's changing so much, and there's a lot of like doomsday, like, oh, SEO is over and stuff like that. And I mean, it's definitely changing, but I at least from where I sit, I definitely do not think it's dead. I don't know I would love to hear what you guys think.
I think SEO should be a part of every marketing program. I don't think it's going to die. It is a descriptor of what we're trying to do, and it helps people find us and helps the engines find us, however those engines are going to be. I would imagine even AI is going to have to use something, as Ann and I were just talking about the other day. They're still going to need something to give them the information and fill it. I like that you're thinking about images and video. I've been doing a lot of that this year. It's my focus is video for the entire company. How are we going to use video all over the place? Not just to drive prospects, but also for our residents, even internally for HR purposes. How can we use video differently and images differently? I've even thought about having action shots in my photos instead of just empty spaces. And I'm playing around with that idea on how it looks, because at a pool, it's going to be full. I don't know why we always have empty everything. I know fair housing, of course, we need to be careful about who we're putting our images and make sure we're marketing to a broader class of people, because of course, anybody who qualifies can move into our communities. But I want to make our pictures more fun. So I've been thinking about how we can do that and have some fun with it. But I don't think it's dead at all. I love this conversation.
I don't think it's dead either, but I think it's like, I don't know, like I said in the intro, it's changing, but it's the same, right? Like, foundationally, we have to be providing information that our prospects are looking for, and that can be categorized or indexed, in a way that it's then returnable by a search engine or ChatGPT or whatever the case may be. And so I think it's really fascinating to think about does how we categorize, index, organize our information shift as, the ways that people find information are different. We've talked a lot about TikTok being a search engine. ChatGPT is rapidly becoming a search engine. And so I think, I don't have an answer, by the way, but that's what I think about a lot is like, well, then how do we tell these engines the information that we think that they should know? So how are you doing it? Like tell us more about your video and image strategy. What are you looking at right now?
Well, I think probably the first part is just investing in a really good content machine and, having someone who's really good with content. We have, kind of 1.5 to 2 people almost fully focused on that. And so it's, and I think the great thing is too, is, when you're getting this rich content, right, you can use these videos obviously for organic on YouTube and Instagram, but you can also leverage that across paid channels, right, through, Google Ads demand gen campaigns or Performance Max or, meta retargeting stuff. And so I think video is like such a powerful thing. And I mean, it's hard when you have, a larger portfolio, right? And you're trying to like, okay, how do we get videos for every single
Yeah.
one? But I think content is, sort of one of those things that just like we can never like we never not have content that we can produce, right? Whether it's related to actually like our properties and trying to, even like I mean, it's also an asset on your website, right? And so you hope it's a conversion tool and people see it and are like, oh, this is great, even if they didn't find it on YouTube or Facebook or whatever. So I think there's just so many purposes of video. And I think it's probably one of those things that's under leveraged because it's really hard to do well. And that's where having, like really creative people who know the industry well are, can actually make compelling media that people want to watch. And it's funny, I actually got one of our ads while I was watching YouTube. I was like doing dishes or something like that. And I was like, what is it? And I was like, oh my God, that's one of our ads, And so, yeah, I think it's just like a really powerful tool that you can deploy in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
I,
totally. Not to switch totally on you, but just to talk about SEO for something that's a little bit different that I'm doing in my descriptions that I'm sending out. I'm not doing the usual tranquil community, located in XYZ. I'm talking about the amenities that people care about there. We're pet friendly. We have this, we have that. Here's what people are actually renting for. And I'm putting that into my descriptions, my short descriptions that are going out on the web. It's specific to that community instead of just the general marketing fluff that we've used for all these years. And that's something I'm doing different for SEO to try to be different, to try to pick up maybe 1 or 2 extra pieces of traffic if I can, because the spider picks up that content that they're searching for, whether it's pet friendly, which most of us are these days, or non-smoking or whatever is unique to your community.
yeah, I think that's interesting. I'm going to go back to the video, Chris, because I'm still kind of fascinated by this because we talked with Chrissy Ficker and she was kind of saying the same things you are about like how difficult it is to produce video at mass scale. They obviously have a solution, right, that they're selling, but it was kind of fascinating. How are you then? Tell us about your team structure to be able to deploy that video in the strategies that you were talking about, like in, streaming ads, YouTube, meta retargeting, etc.
Yeah. So, what we try to do, at least for new development, we'll try and get one, solid 2 to 4 minute video that, tells the story about the property. Like Chris said, highlight the best amenities there, highlight the neighborhood, things like that. And then literally just like get it on the website, get it in our, Performance Max ads, get it on Facebook, kind of just get it everywhere. And then also with short form video. And so there's, you're just kind of like trying to like cover all your bases and find that like if there's any platform that someone is on, like they could potentially surface this. And I think, like you said, Chris, like you're trying to get like marginal wins here and there, right? Where you're not going to get like, I don't think there's, 1 billion people a day searching for apartment tours in Columbus or that sort of thing, right? But you're trying to like sort of just maximize the piece of the pie you have so that you own that organically. And then also on a paid side, like the numbers make sense and, it's having an impact on people who are thinking about your community and all that sort of stuff. Because I think, and I guess to kind of backtracking a little bit to what you're saying, and before I got in this industry, a lot of my time was in e-commerce. And so in e-commerce, video is utilized so much because you don't have a storefront like all of our properties do, right? People drive by, like, attribution, I think, is a lot more actually hard to track in this industry. Whereas e-commerce, I think it's actually a good amount. I mean, it's still impossible, but it's a lot easier there because it's almost all digital, right? There's word of mouth, there's awareness stuff that you may not be able to track. But in e-commerce, basically the entire focus is on content and on ads that convert, because otherwise people have no other way to find you. If you're selling like lotion or something like that, people are not going to Google you and find your lotion, right? And so you're like fully focused on like, how do I create an ad that converts? And if you find that winning ad in e-commerce, you just like scale it to the moon, right? And like, sell out all your inventory and all that sort of stuff. Whereas in this industry, you only have a certain amount of inventory, and there's a bit more in terms of market forces that actually impact whether the ad converts or not. So I think that, I mean, there's a lot of different things, but I think sort of at least my inspiration is just like, people are looking for like to be persuaded. They're looking to live a lifestyle, and that's not always going to happen through sort of the traditional, text and blog posts and whatever. It's going to be through like really good video. But again, that's hard to do. And that's why we have, like, the first thing was like, hey, let's get a really good content person. Let's get sort of our production on point and all that sort of stuff.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I have a big team too for the size of company I'm at, and we're investing in microphones, better microphones, because we're doing so much video now that we want to make the quality to that next level where it is going to make a difference with a boom mic or a different lapel mic or whatever we're choosing to use for that video. I mean, it does make a difference when you have a team and you can get the content. For us, the content, at least on video, is just doing things that are different, and I talk about that all the time. For us to compete with the Gray Stars and Willow Bridges of the world, or Cushman & Wakefield, whoever you want to name is one of the big companies out there, we have to take the time, just like you're talking about on the video content or on the SEO description, or figuring out how to do our images just a little bit different, because that's what makes you stand out against everybody else who's templated or just doing what they can because they have 300 communities that they have to manage. I mean, we talked about this the other day with Sarah. It's like, some of these companies, when you have 300 communities, like, do you really want to have 300 individual websites? Like, that's a lot to manage, right? And that's why a lot of people are going back to single domain. And I know you're newer to the industry. I talk about this a lot. We used to do that back in the day. But to the point, like, we know digital better now. Maybe a single domain works better for these larger companies. But for us to compete, at least in my shoes, if we do the video the way that you're talking about it, and you have a plan and you try, we're not brain surgeons. We're not going to kill anybody. We have the ability in our industry to go try something and let it fail. I have many failures under my belt, but I've always learned from them and try to get them better. Not everything is going to be a grand slam out the park.
Yeah. And I think what you touched on is key, is like, the bigger dogs don't have time for this because they dominate, like, Zillow or CoStar, right? They don't care about the Columbus market, right? They're like, how much we spend on backlinks, and how much Google respects our domain authority. Like, they don't care. So the marginal wins you can get in video and all that sort of stuff, I think, again, it's not going to overtake their, number one position ranking for basically every apartment search term under the sun, but it's still a way in which you can grow your organic presence and at least have an edge on that front.
Have you found anything, because you said you came from e-commerce, have you done anything to your property websites to make them more e-commerce-y like have you found that you've been able to pull any of your e-commerce experience over to the websites specifically?
Here's kind of a good failure. I'm not sure you call it, I guess. I mean, it was
learning.
Yeah, it's a test that did not work. We had, so, basically on the front cover of your property website, you have an image of the property, right? Or maybe a carousel or whatever, right? We're like, oh, let's get like such a cool like drone footage, and let's get like really cool, shots of the amenities and the properties, and it'll be like a beautiful day. And let's run like an A/B test and see like what changes as far as like bounce rate, leads, like conversions, like time on page, like, I mean, just general stuff to see like, hey, did this actually matter? And we saw, I'm not even kidding you, we saw zero change whatsoever. And I even thought there'd be a little bit of change because I'm like, even the season normally changes it, right? Like March is maybe like slower than April, and but there was literally zero change at all. So that was one of those things where I was like, you know what, there is a lot I can bring from e-commerce and thinking about it differently, but the product we sell is like fundamentally different, and certain things are, I think there's almost a lot more like subjective here, just because there's, I mean, this is the biggest expense people have, right? So you could have the coolest drone shot in the world, but if like someone can't afford the property, it's like, okay, they don't care how cool that is. So that was one of the things that was, I guess, a learning of like, oh, not everything, perfectly translates, or cooler doesn't always mean like better results. I don't know if you guys have had anything like that where you're like, oh, it just didn't work, but it sounds like a great idea.
I mean, no. The only thing I can think of like was we tried to change the name of the floor plans link once to something else to see if it would get people to click more, and it didn't. So floor plans is the second most visited page typically on our website. So, to lose navigation to that was kind of not the best thing, but that's the only real like test that I can think of that we ran. But same thing, I was like, well, I'm glad we did this on like 2 properties, because now we know that, it wasn't the best idea. But we've talked a lot about this idea of like, even though apartments are such a large expense, like, is there a way to streamline that purchase process? Just make it, applications are daunting and just all of that. It's like, can we move people along a little better and have it be more like buying clothes or something like that? But, if you figure out the secret, come back, let us know.
Well, so I got a phone call from someone who's working on a startup in Cincinnati, and they're trying to do a thing that's almost like a universal application system kind of deal. That, kind of like you said, like a one-click checkout for property management. I was like, oh, that's a great idea. It's going to get hard, to adopt. You got to integrate with all these softwares and all that sort of stuff. But you're right. Some of the stuff is just like, I don't know how much that's going to change unless the industry just flat out is like, all right, we're done sort of doing like the norms here, and, these really lengthy applications with credit checks, like very personal information. Like that stuff is, hard for me because I'm coming from e-commerce, and it literally just like reduces much friction as possible. And here it's like just not possible. Or if it is, like, yeah, I've been seeing it.
I don't know. Like, I always equate it to like, you can go to a store and give them your social security number and they'll approve you for a credit card. Like on the spot, like at the little point of sales. Hey, do you want to save 20%? Yes. Okay. Fill out the application on our little point of sales thing, and it takes like 3 minutes. Anyway, so I'm like, one day that will exist.
I think it's a little bit more complicated just because of this is somebody's largest expense. When you go to buy a car, you go to buy a house, it's complicated. I mean, it is. And we're renting apartments. And if you think about it, on the low end, people are spending $15,000 to $20,000 a year to live in our spaces. And so I think you want to make sure that they're paying. Obviously, if you have the asset, that's disastrous, as we know, if we bring in low quality traffic that doesn't pay at the end of the day. So I think that's why it's been so complicated. It doesn't mean we can't fix it. I think there are some tools that are coming out. We know, we talked to Yardi and they have some fun. Paul has some great stuff coming down the pike that they're working on to tie into businesses and kind of do some of the steps ahead of time. But at the end of the day, you have to verify who the person is. And that's why it's so complicated. And actually, we go pretty fast, maybe not as fast as a car, but certainly faster than a house. If for those of you that bought a house, that process is pretty lengthy. So I think that's part of it. All in talking of all this, you talk about attribution, which I think is really hard in our industry, and it always has been. I don't think you can have perfect attribution no matter how much digitally you're trying to track, because there's just so many unknowns. What are you doing? Are you doing anything, trying to do anything to help with your attribution? Do you use a straight attribution model? Do you try to split it? What's your process?
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I don't think even in e-commerce where it's much more like trackable, I think almost every, like, if you get 80%, 80% is still really good. So I like to think we're closer to 80%. And for me, when I came to my role, it wasn't so much of a focus. And so that's why when I came into this role, I was like, oh, okay, it needs to be a really big focus. And we can always dial it back and say, hey, we don't know, whether this is actually driving actual like leads or leases, or they didn't click on it or whatever, but we can see sort of other top of funnel metrics like, oh, the engagement's really good. That shows us like, hey, it probably had an impact. So I generally will look at first touch and multi-touch, and from there get just a sense of what's working. And I think a lot of time too, you're able to see like what is really not working. So for example, there was one ILS that we were spending a lot of money on, and pretty quickly we found out like they're not super strong in our market. And even just through some basic Googling popular search terms, I was like, oh, that's funny. Like they're a pretty big ILS, like, but they're like not ranking for like most of these keywords in the top 3 to 5 slots. And so from that, and so just looking at and comparing, hey, ILS A to B, like we're not getting that from A. So a lot of that was from attribution that we got that. But like you said, it's definitely not perfect. And, the process too is so long. It's 2, 3, 4, 5 months sometimes. And so you never know, a person could be driving around town, or they heard something from a friend, or there's just so many different ways people could find your place. And so we try to treat it not as, oh, this is 100% fact, but like, oh, this is like generally trustworthy. And I think that's maybe the I don't know if that's the best, we can do at this point, but maybe it just is.
I kind of agree with you. I think I always say like our data is probably about 80% good, but that's enough. As long as it's 80% good across all of our sources, then that's enough to guide us to make decisions, and be able to at least spot like, okay, where are there opportunities to change? Or so I'm with you. I don't know if the time put into trying to figure out an attribution model would change the performance enough to make it worth the time put in when, we kind of have a guidance already from the data we have.
What's interesting too is we just talked to Grady, who is the owner and founder of Resi, and he said, in your industry, you don't have a lot of data. And it's true. Like we get 10,000 visitors a month to the website, which, yeah, that 10,000 is 10,000 people, but Amazon, they probably get, I don't know, what, 1 billion a day or something. I don't know. I'm just making up a number. I have no idea, but or how many searches does Google do a day? So the data we are getting actually isn't even that much. So we have to dial it in as best we can. We know it's not going to be perfect, but it's not like, it's true, right? That was really kind of insightful, really got me thinking on what the data I'm actually looking at. Because in our little world, it seems like, oh yeah, we're up or we're down, or that's a lot or it's a little, but like compared to other industries, it's nothing, right? It's just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I have a random question for you guys speaking about traffic. Like, are you looking at traffic trends on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis? Like, how do you look to see if property traffic is trending up or down? Like, what is your time frame that you're comparing?
I'll go first.
I'm sorry, so random, but
I look at it weekly and I look at it year over year, and I judge a lot of what's going on by the leases that we're getting, the net leases that we're getting. And I look at, as you know, Anne, but Paul, you may or may not know, I don't market to current occupancy. I don't care what we're currently occupied at. I do care though what we're trending to. And don't get me wrong, of course I care. We want to be highly occupied, but I'm looking at the trend. And so I look at the trend of this year to last year as well to see, are we in the same ballpark? Is this the yearly trend, or did this property fall off compared to what we were doing last year, same time period? Because it helps kind of conceptualize how many more levers do I need to pull, or can I just wait this out because I know that we're just going to have a dip. So, and I kind of look at it from I use a couple of different data points. I certainly look at it every Monday, but I compare it to year over year. And then if there's a problem, I pull the data for the last quarter, and then I'll pull it for year to date. And then I pull it for the year prior, same time period, and just compare it that way and just see what are we doing, up or down. I have a couple of properties right now. I am not performing as well as last year, and we can't really figure it out because I think we're doing better marketing that was in place than when we started doing what we're doing. But then a lot of properties were outperforming. So, as you know, it could be a sub-market thing, and that's what we're having the conversations. But by pulling the data the way that I'm pulling it, it opens up the dialogue to say, okay, what is different? Why aren't we where we want to be?
And question for you, Chris. Are you guys, what property management software do you use?
We're real page.
Real page? Okay. Just curious. But yeah, so we'll do, I mean, I'll look at it, of course, on like a weekly basis and sort of same thing. You know, we realized pretty early on that like, oh, it's really only the trending that matters, and you're going to adjust advertising spend based on that and what you have available and whatnot. But I would say it depends on like the season. Like in the fall and winter, we were like very much like tracking like, okay, what were we doing like week over week? Because when your numbers go down, like, you know, this business does seasonally, you're like, oh, is this normal, right?
Yeah.
How much of this is based on what's, you know, the market, the economy, how much money we're spending, how much money we're not spending, all those sort of things. So I would say probably as we've got out of winter, I've been a little bit more lax on that and just seeing like, okay, what's like week over week? Are we growing? Are we going downhill? Do we have a bunch of properties that are struggling? Do we have a bunch of properties that are doing really well? So I think is that an adequate answer?
Yeah, no, it was just something I've been thinking about. So I was like, we're kind of talking about it, so I'm just going to throw that out there.
How do you do it?
Both monthly, we'll look at it year over year, or excuse me, weekly, sometimes year over year. But I had a comment the other day about like, oh, traffic has really gone down week over week. And I was kind of trying to figure out like, well, what percentage would concern people? Do you know what I mean? Then it made me start thinking like, well, of course it goes down, of course it goes up and down, but like what percentage is a threshold of concern? And so it just started making me kind of think about all these other things like, do we need to kind of have a standard where we say like we expect traffic to fluctuate 10%, week to week if we haven't made changes? I'm making the 10% up, but like, week to week if we haven't changed anything. And if it's more than that, we'll look year to year or something to that effect. So as I said, just kind of thinking about it. But
Well, I actually do a Monday report that I send out to people. That's just a marketing report. I put the traffic on there, but I also put the conversion rates for the communities on how they're converting that traffic. So we're looking at like the conversation that I'm always having when this comes up, because as you know, it's always marketing first. What are you guys doing? What's wrong? It's like, okay, well, we can spend more money. I mean, that's never going to be an issue. I'll be the first to raise my hand to do it. But if the communities aren't converting and I'm showing you, here's 5 weeks in a row and your conversion rate's 10%, it doesn't matter if I send you more traffic. Like we got to do something on the team, or we got to have them get shops, or we just need to have a discussion on what's going on. Why aren't they converting? What is it price? Get it back into the 4 Ps. And so having that report, Paul, I'm all about opening up conversations. I've been doing this so long now. Nobody is fully responsible. It's a team effort here. And so by having the data and just force feeding the data to the regionals and to upper management and just saying, here it is. All right, now let's open. Here's what the traffic is. Here's what our conversion rate is. Let's go talk about it and go figure it out. It's helped me be successful my whole career, because we're just being transparent. And then you can have the conversations and, was it raining that week? Did you get sleet? There's some crazy accident on the highway that shut down, Gallos, there's, millions of highways. I'm sure you guys see it all the time. It's taking me time to get used to, even coming from California. I mean, weather here changes. We were 50 degrees one day or 90 degrees the next, literally overnight. And so that's going to affect your traffic and you guys are experiencing that kind of stuff too. So, I mean, to me, it's like, if I just put that in front of them, then we can have the discussion.
then it just opens up the conversation. No, I think that's fair. I did marketing for a lawn care company, and it was crazy to see how the lead volume would change based on the weather. Like I never would have thought of it. And we actually ended up building a system where we would, based on weather forecast, we would increase bids and daily budgets if it was going to be nicer out. And then we would decrease them if it was going to be like rainy or cold or whatever. Like that's how much it depended on the weather. So anyway, I digress. But Paul, what else? So we've talked about SEO, we've talked about attribution. Has all of this focus from an image and video standpoint, have you seen increases in organic traffic to your websites?
Yeah, we definitely have. And the increase in actual like clicks has been slower. It's still increased a good amount, but probably the biggest is impressions, which is normally the thing to actually, what actually lists is like kind of, or I guess what I've seen is that your impressions go up, and that's normally the first sign like, oh, actually we're doing better. And then the clicks generally follow. And so we've definitely seen that, and that's been a huge win for us. But one thing that we sort of touched on before we started the call, but I think is really interesting, is obviously with Zillow sort of acquiring Rent.com's listings, business, and all that sort of stuff. I think for me, one of the reasons why we have gone all in on organic is that, basically Zillow and Apartments.com own, at this point, I don't know, 80% of the market. Like, it's basically just two oligarchs, and I've always loved like the pay per lease model. And I'm not sure if that's universal, because I have met people who are like, I don't love it, which always surprises me. But like my bold prediction, I don't know how bold this is, but in 2020, as fast as Zillow can legally get out of their contracts to go to a subscription model, that they are absolutely going to do that. And that was already like kind of, our Zillow rep was like floating that around, but just as like I've thought more and more about it, I was like, oh, this is definitely going to happen. I'm just like waiting for them to roll it out, but they're probably going to wait until January 1st to like actually do that. I don't know if you guys have any bold predictions on that front.
I wouldn't be surprised, but I think what you're talking about is interesting because it's this idea of basically like you have to build your own marketing. And Chris and I were actually talking about this the other day. You have to build your own marketing funnel. And that means like owning your ads, owning where they're going, and really building it ultimately so that hopefully it's leading to your website, because that's an owned asset as well. And so that way, when changes happen, like what we saw with Rent and Zillow, and, as Apartments.com continues to, be kind of a leader from a traffic standpoint and all that, it's like you almost don't have to rely on them because you've built your own traffic machine. And so I think that's what I'm hearing you say, is that all of these things that you're focusing on, like ultimately will allow you to be self-reliant from a marketing standpoint as, the market and sources kind of continue to shift, which I think is the smartest thing ever.
They're for sure going to do it. And I'm even that bold for you to say it. They've already approached me and said, when my contract's up, they're going to have that option available. It's just coming up in August. It's not going to be till July. I don't think maybe it'll be January 1st for everybody, but as contracts run up on what you're doing, they're going to bring that to you. They already kind of had it with Zillow Boost and some other stuff that they were doing, and it just makes sense now that they have the rent that they're leasing from, whatever's left of Redfin, that they're going to go to that model. I love pay per lease. I don't know why anybody on this planet would not love a pay per lease program. I use Apartment List. I use a Lyft with Apartment List. I love it. To me, it's like the biggest no brainer, and it's going to really hurt because Zillow has been one of those tools that for my communities, a lot of my competitors are not on it because they don't think renters and when I was doing some C stuff, we're not using Zillow, and they absolutely are. Everybody uses Zillow. And so I was winning on the Zillow front. I mean, I was getting tons of leases that my competitors are just missing out on because they weren't there. In some of my markets, I was the only one advertising, which is incredible. So, but I do agree with you. I don't think it's so bold. I think Anne has some bolder, if we're going to end the podcast with bold predictions, I know Anne has one that she loves to talk about. I don't have anything really bold this year. I was surprised with what happened with Rent. I mean, Apartment Guide was the longest living, I think, one of the longest living in our industry. It's really shocking that they're just gone overnight, almost seemingly. I do think that we'll probably see some more consolidation. I don't think it's going to happen this year. But to Anne's point, I think we have to get smarter. I mean, we talk about this all the time. I mean, people who listen regularly are just going to say, you guys keep repeating yourselves, but it's true. How many industries literally pay to put themselves next to their competitor and pay a lot of money for it with no guarantee that it's going to work? I mean, at least with hotels and airlines, at least you're putting in like a stay, and it's like you're going somewhere, you need a hotel for something. Like, this is where you're going to live and spend 20, 30 grand a year. And we're great just throwing it up with everybody else and with no real changes to the model and not a lot of help from our ILS partners on attribution. Mind you, they all kind of want to keep their data kind of separate instead of making sure that we can get the data and everything ties together And it's kind of wild. I mean, we're all playing by the same rules, but at some point, I think we need to just get out of it. And that would be my bold prediction. And I think probably AI is going to change that a little bit. And as these generations behind us come up, they're not going to talk to people as much, and they want it to be seamless, and they want to be able to do all their business how they want to do it on the sites that they want to do it. And I don't think our model is going to work for them.
One quick thing I'll add to that, Chris, is we were running a multi-touch report on a couple of properties, and you would think, and I was surprised by this, you would think people go, use Zillow, you use apartments.com, apartment list, you would use a bunch of different ILSs. But what we saw was that if you used apartments.com, you maybe use another ILS, but a lot of times it was not Zillow, and vice versa. You may use Apartment List or Rent Cafe ILS, but it was pretty rare to see people both use Zillow and apartments.com, which I think, speaks to the need of, hey, people are using different ones. And that's sort of what Zillow is going to come back with June, July, as soon as they can do it. And they're like, hey, you can't play ball without us. And now marketing departments like us are, being forced, hey, are we spending monthly dollars on both, apartments.com and Zillow without any guarantee of performance? And, exactly like you said, advertising next to our competitors, showing a lot of, oh, we have a gym. Well, we have a gym. I mean, okay, great. Everyone has a fitness gym except a few communities here and there, right? So I think that's the really interesting thing is like, both cannot win for every marketing department. At some point they'll be like, hey, you choose one. And then that's where you're going to have to rely on, the organic stuff now, like you said, and your own marketing machine. Does that work well enough to compensate for you not being able to spend $3, $4, $5 a month on just subscription products?
Yeah. I think that's interesting. I would hate to see, I guess the only other thing I would say too is that maybe if we can somehow prove out that even if an ILS isn't performing from a lead standpoint, that the lift that we're getting from impressions or being seen is then somehow contributing to the rest of the marketing funnel, that would be my only other argument. Like, do we start thinking about ILSs as more of like display advertising or, more in the awareness, as opposed to now we're kind of looking at it from a consideration and purchase standpoint, but maybe we move it up in the funnel and look at it like a cost, CPM or something like that.
It's a good thought, but some of these ILSs are pretty expensive for just trying to get some impressions.
No, I know. Yes, I understand. And then you have to start considering, what we've talked about before. Like, so first of all, people are looking at, first they're filtering, right? And I think like 30% of people use filters on ILSs. Then they're looking at price and thumbnail. And so like you have to win like on that. But if they're seeing your name with the other, I just don't know. But you're right. In some markets, I mean, Columbus, Paul, you and I both know that the rates are very high on some of the ILSs in Columbus. It's very fascinating. But I would say some of our submarkets, there are rates that are more reasonable. But then we also see our rent ranges are different in the submarkets. So we do actually see from a performance standpoint better results in kind of our submarkets. And I think it's because of package price and then also rent range, that those kind of two marry nicely together. I digress. Anyway, you're right, Chris, but that's just kind of my thought, like, do we just think about them within the funnel differently?
I just wish we could, as an industry, come up with our own ILS that we're just posting our own stuff on. Have some guidelines, post it. I don't know. Do something as an industry.
Come up with our own ILS?
We would do it, just the three of us. We'll have our own ILS in the 5 markets we're in.
That's fine.
Yeah, we could like combine forces, like our own private ILS.
You guys have some overlap. I'm just winning. If you're searching Dallas, let's go.
Just winning.
There we go.
Yeah, Paul and I are fist fighting over like which one of our properties is in the first position. You're fine.
Maybe that's what the bold is. And I've seen people talk about it. I mean, there's some people out there talking about how we can reshape our own industry, doing our own thing. And I don't know, maybe it's one of the associations kind of runs it and we can all list, if we're a member of the association or something. I don't know. I'm just spitballing, of course, but it just seems like something is going to break because we can't all spend $2,000 a month and then PPC. And then, that's why pay per lease is so great. Cause I mean, I don't care. I don't care them out there. I don't care what that, if I get that lease, I know I'm getting the ROI. With some of these other ILSs, I mean, I had to take a hard look in the mirror. I cut my budgets on most of them because, if you do the cost per lease on some of my communities, I'm not making this up. It was $5,000 a lease, $6,000 a lease. I mean, it's unjustifiable.
No, it's too much.
And some of them were $200 a lease because that market loved apartment. So I use apartments.com. Fine, they love that market. And I got cost per lease at 200, and so of course I'm going to spend the money. But it's not like that everywhere.
Yeah. And I think like one thing I haven't heard people talk about that much is how bad this is for the actual consumer. You think you're fine. You think you're spending all this time going through Apartment Guide, For Rent, Zillow, and you think you're finding different listings, and you're actually just finding the same exact listings. And I think that sucks to go, if I go on Yelp or, God, I'm not a foodie, so this was a terrible example. But if I go on all these like food things and I'm getting the exact same results, that's just a really bad search experience. And I think, if there is any sort of disruption, and that's why I hope Apartment List wins, not just because they're pay per lease, but because they're just kind of doing something different. So I think that's a real bummer that it's just like there's two companies that control it. And if you don't find your list, like a listing on there, it just doesn't exist really.
Yeah. That unless, of course, as people start going away from Google and using other places to search, is there an advantage there where there's a little bit of window for individual properties or property management companies to really get visibility where maybe some of those larger organizations might not? I'm just kind of thinking this whole thing is, I don't know, it's just really fascinating. Apartment List. I was going to ask you something too, Paul, kind of around I was like, I had something, your comment about the consumer, the prospect experience. The other thing I'll say too, that's kind of interesting. Have you used Ed and High's shop tool yet from Flair?
Oh, we have not used it yet, but we've been meaning to.
Okay. Well, it's awesome and you'll find lots of things. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting that I found was how many emails a prospect gets from an ILS after they submit a lead. So not necessarily from your site team, but from the individual ILS. And so, going back to the consumer experience and building your own marketing machine, just all this stuff, it's like, I've been texting Chris. I submitted a lead to Zumper. That was 2 days ago. I've gotten 11 emails from Zumper. 11 from my one lead for one property.
Not even the property itself, just Zumper.
Yeah, no, the property didn't write me back because it's ours, and I said, whatever, fine, but
Wow.
that's okay. But yeah, from Zumper, hey, you contacted the property. Hey, here's other properties you might like. Hey, yeah, it was, and I was like, oh my gosh, why are we doing this? Like, why would we, and I'm not trying to call they're not alone in providing that experience, but it just, to your point, kind of why are we doing this? Like, why are we inadvertently creating this experience for the prospect?
We got to get better. That's the disruption. And I think conversations, it will, at some point, it'll catch on. But, for the big boys that have 300,000 units, I mean, they just need to get the name out there. They have all the pull. They get the best rates. Of course, they're going to be on these things because it helps them. So I don't know. I mean, great conversation. Let's see if we can get the ball rolling. Are you going to AIM, Paul?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, great. We'll hang out.
Let's all meet up and we can get with some of our colleagues and say, let's do it. Let's get our own. Let's go.
Yeah. Wow. What a big idea is happening at AIM. I love it. So the last thing, Chris, you've been liking to ask people something about ChatGPT, Google. What have you been asking people?
Oh, we were messing around. It's just, do you think Google, this is Google's crossroads with all the AI coming? I think Google's going to survive. I think Ann thinks they're going to die. What do you think, Paul? You could be the tiebreaker.
Oh, no, I don't think Google's going to die. I think I'm way too tied into Google that's not search related. And if Google started charging me more for my Gmail, my Google Drive use, all the Google products that I use on a daily basis, I would have to. I don't know where else I would take it, But as far as their search business, I mean, which is the majority of Google, you're right. I have no idea what they're going to do about that, because that is quite the predicament. But to me, they have so many other lines of businesses, and they're so diversified. And even you look at YouTube, like YouTube itself is a massive search business. So I definitely don't think Google's going away, but I'm curious as to how dead you think they're going to be.
Like Yahoo dead.
All the way.
All the way. Now, to be fair, Paul, I think that is good that you're saying that I also agree that like maybe Google Photos and Google Gmail, like that's not going to go away. But so I need to clarify my statement. Google search.
I think that's fair.
Okay, cool. You can be a guest anytime. Thank you for agreeing with me. Paul, we've really appreciated having you on. This was so fun. I can't wait to continue our conversation at AIM and just in general. It sounds like you're doing some really amazing things. So thank you for being a guest. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you to Carlos, our producer. And until next time, this has been the Apartment Department.